Hi everyone and welcome to a deck tech I'm doing with someone else. This is a very rare type of video I do because one, I only ever really do deck techs on my own decks when there's not really much content to do when Wizards haven't released anything and I need to get a video out. Then I also rarely do collabs with people, mainly because I'm a smaller channel and not many people want to, but this is one of the chances that I've actually got the opportunity to collab with another Magic the Gathering creator.
Hello everyone, my name is Tyler, but you may know me on Instagram as MTGDaddy, but you can just call me your Canadian Papa. I post a lot of pack openings and box openings, foil cards, some decks that I have brewed or had help brewing, and hopefully in the future recording a game or two with friends of mine. I'm also part of the Trade Chain gang, which you can find on Instagram as well, where we trade our way up to a desired card that we want or need. But enough about me, let's get into our commander.
So together we decided to separate this entire deck into different parts. It's pretty much a normal deck tech video I do. We talk about the commander, the sub-commander, the cards inside of it, and then give our thoughts and opinions on the deck as a whole. So when it comes to the commander, James will be explaining it.
What we have for you today is a rare Boros legendary human god, weighing in at 5'4", costing 5 mana, being 2 generic mana, 2 red mana, and 1 white mana, with its first ability giving itself vigilance and haste if you have 1 or fewer cards in your hand, which is spicy and all, but not the reason why we have this card. It is the second ability that we are focused on and why we wanted to build this deck around it. Today we'll be talking about Djeru and Hozoret from the set March of the Machine, and we'll be building around its second ability, which is whenever Djeru and Hozoret attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may exile a legendary creature card from among them. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Until end of turn, you may cast the exile card without paying its mana cost. We also want to make sure that we pay attention to the word cast, for some of the cards we have picked require you to cast instead of just putting it onto the battlefield. I feel like this is a forgotten card compared to some of the other commanders such as the Ur-Dragon, Yuriko, the Tiger Shadow, and Edgar Markov, and many more, but we don't have time for that. But which isn't a bad thing, since you can pick Djeru and Hozoret up for less than $1 US, which what we call in Canada is $1. If you are able to get your commander out and swinging the same turn, you can be looking at sending down another legendary creature to make things more fun for you, and to make things not so fun for your opponents. The reason why I picked this card is because one commander night with a bunch of friends, one of them played Djeru and Hozoret. I didn't think much of it until he started putting his bombs onto the battlefield, and he brought an Eldrazi out to make sure that we realized that we were not going to win this game. So after that, I built my own, not because of its sheer destructiveness, but because it actually looked amazing to play with, and even though I lost against it, I still had fun playing against it.
And I got the sub-commander, and the sub-commander of the deck is
Kadric, Soul Kindler, 2 generic mana, red mana, white mana. Legendary creature, Dwarf Wizard. The legend rule doesn't apply to tokens you control. Whenever another non-token legendary permanent you control enters, you may pay 1 generic mana. If you do, create a token that's a copy of it. That token gains haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. 4/3.
The main reason I picked this is I wanted to pick again the commander that roughly is the same as the one we currently picked, and I went through every single Boros commander, and this one actually suited, in my personal opinion, better than any other. There was a fair few competitions that were close, but I thought this would be perfect for the deck. And now we're starting off with the Planeswalkers. When it comes to Planeswalkers, I have picked 2, and they are
Huatli, Warrior Poet, 3 generic mana, red mana, white mana. Karn, Scion of Urza, 4 generic mana.
When it comes to Karn, I just seen kind of when this is perfect for the deck, but when it came to Huatli, it was just a lucky mistake. I was just flicking through Planeswalkers in all them variations of colours that I'm allowed to put in the deck and picked these 2.
We also went with Lilia, the Blade Reforged, which is a 3 mana 2/2 legendary spirit warrior with haste. And whenever Lilia the Blade Reforged attacks, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. Whenever one or more cards that are put into exile from your library and or your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on Lilia, which is pretty good because we can get Lilia to be pretty big, and then hopefully swing with hopefully 4/4 or 5/5 for that turn. And we also went with Lauren of the Third Path, which is a 3 mana 2/1 legendary human artificer with vigilance. And whenever Lauren of the Third Path enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment, which huge bonus because there's a lot of artifacts and enchantments that you can definitely get rid of in Game of Commander, but it also has the ability where you can tap Lauren and you and target opponent each draw a card. So you can do the whole political talk of, hey, if you leave Lauren alone, you and I will draw a card. But we'll see how everyone's politicking is during a game of Commander. We went with Mangara the Diplomat, which is a 4 mana 2/4 legendary human cleric with lifelink. And whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, if 2 or more of those creatures are attacking you and or planeswalkers you control, you draw a card. So whether or not you lose a planeswalker or lose a creature for blocking or you just let it through, you gotta draw a card. And whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, draw a card, which again, with Commander, everyone's going to be drawing more than 1 card, so don't worry, you'll be drawing that extra card. We went with Myal, Shield of Argive, which is a 4 mana 3/4 legendary human soldier, which during your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments, which is huge. That's what we definitely need. And then whenever Myal, Shield of Argive attacks, create X 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of soldiers you control. So you can go pretty wide, especially with the extra combat phases. Next creature is Audri, Lunar Marshal, which is a 4 mana 3/3 legendary human soldier with, at the beginning of each combat, creatures you control gain first strike until end of turn if a creature you control has first strike. The same is true for flying, death touch, double strike, haste, every other ability under the moon. And huge help, because if you have 1 creature with haste and you want your guys to swing on the same turn, perfect, you're laughing, especially with the extra combat phase. Like as soon as Djeru and Hozoret brings new legendary creatures onto the battlefield, if they can gain haste, then like again, battlefield will be in your favor. Regan Nimble Pilferer, sorry. Obviously everyone knows this monkey pirate, 1 mana 2/1. Whenever Regan deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token and exile the top card of that player's library. Until end of turn, you may cast that card, which again helps us out. Not only do we get a treasure token, which helps go towards like drawing a legendary creature that we didn't want to draw, but hey, now we have the extra mana to play it, perfect. But also we may draw a card an opponent has that they either really need or that we can take advantage of and play it. Rhea Dawnbringer, that is a 9 mana 4/6 legendary angel with flying, and at the beginning of your upkeep you may return target creature card from your graveyard to play. So this card was picked because if we ever got into a pickle where we couldn't bring creatures back or we couldn't get indestructible out in time, don't worry, Rhea can just bring it back onto the battlefield and yeah, just like nothing ever changed. Greaves, Defector Might, 1 mana 1/1 legendary artifact, Phyrexian Might, which Toxic 1 is nice, but we're not focused on that. Greaves Defector Might can't block, we're not worried about that. It is the Phyrexian, so either pay 1 white or 2 life, tap it, choose a color, another target creature you control gains Toxic 1 and Hexproof from that color until end of turn. It can't be blocked by creatures of that color this turn. So again, if we want to swing in with Djeru and Hozoret, but there's like a defender out, well, not like it needs to deal combat damage to get anything out, but it more or less protecting it from, let's say, Death Touch. We can say, nope, it gets not protection, but just it can't be blocked by creatures of that spell. So again, we chose this card for that reason. Thalia, Heretic Cathar. 3 mana, 3/2, legendary human soldier with first strike, and the reason why we went with this card is because creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. So are you frustrated not being able to play spells because that 1 mana you need or that 1 creature to block is now tapped? Well, that's why we put Thalia in there. We also went with Tordas de Evenant, Fury Rider. It is a 4 mana, 3/3 legendary human knight, uncommon as well, with vigilance and trample. And whenever it attacks, all other attacking creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Other red attacking creatures you control gain trample until end of turn, and untap each other white attacking creature you control. So with it being Boros, there's going to be a lot of white cards that will be untapping, and a lot of reds doing some heavy damage with trample. And another Eldrazi is Ulamog the Defiler. 10 mana, 7/7, legendary Eldrazi. When you cast a spell, target opponent exiles half their library rounded up. So with this Ulamog being printed from the newer Modern Horizon set, it was hard to pass this one up. It had to go into this deck. Again, I know everyone doesn't want to exile half their library rounded up, but if you gotta win, you gotta win. But that ward ability, sacrifice 2 permanents. So again, it's essentially like Annihilator 2 if you want to just get rid of it. But hopefully with Absent onto the battlefield, it will have Indestructible and you have nothing to worry about. But the second ability, well, the next 2 abilities. Ulamog the Defiler enters the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 creatures, or counters, sorry, on it, equal to the greatest mana value among cards in exile. So, if you choose an opponent that you know has a high mana costing like deck, but like maybe you might get lucky with a specific card, you can put that many +1/+1 counters on it, which is crazy. And then not only with the ward having sacrifice 2 permanents, but Ulamog has Annihilator X, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on it. So if you manage to flip something that is, let's say, mana costing 10 to 12, just Annihilator 10 is just disgusting, and I love it. Not going against me, but an opponent. Moving on, we have Urabrask the Hidden, which is a 5 mana 4/4 legendary Phyrexian Praetor, which creatures you control have haste, and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. So another annoying card where everything your opponents control enter in tap, but it gives your creatures haste, so then you can swing in sooner and hopefully deal that extra little bit of damage. We went with Wild Magic Sorcerer, which is a 4 mana 4/3 creature Orc Shaman. Actually, this is not a legendary. This is not a legendary, but the ability we needed for the ability, and the ability is the first spell you cast from exile each turn has Cascade. How could you not pass that up? Like, yes, it's not legendary, but that's fine, because Cascade, you're going to be playing a lot of cards from exile. Lilia, Djeru, and Hozoret. I know the other cards I just can't think at the moment, but being able to cascade. So with Djeru and Hozoret, you're able to pull out an Ulamog. You cascade for something that is 10 or less. Insane. That's why that one is in there. And everyone's favorite dog, Yoshimaru Ever Faithful. 1 mana, 1/1, legendary dog. And whenever another legendary permanent enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Yoshimaru Ever Faithful. So we want this dog. This dog it's just gonna be huge. It's like you're gonna have to make sure you have a big enough +1/+1 counter on this guy. It's gonna be so big if the dog stays on, but again, it will, guaranteed, knock on wood. And then lastly, we have Zeltapa Primal Dawn, which is a 6 mana 4/8 legendary creature, Elder Dinosaur, which has flying, double strike, vigilance, trample, and indestructible. Which with Audri out on the field, everything's going to be getting flying, double strike, vigilance, trample, and indestructible. So even though we have multiple cards that will give indestructible or trample or vigilance, double strike, so on and so forth, it's not going to hurt to have that extra amount of abilities to dish those out. Like, the more the merrier.
So now I'm doing the instants and sorcerers of this deck. In this deck there are
A Chrome is Will 3 generic mana white mana. Chance for Glory 1 generic mana red mana white mana. Deflecting Palm 1 red mana white mana. Take the Bait 2 generic mana red mana white mana. Apex of Power 7 generic mana red mana. Blasphemous Act 8 generic mana red mana. Deafening Clarion 1 generic mana red mana white mana. Urza's Ruinous Blast 4 generic mana white mana.
majority of these are just Boros good stuff cards, but there are a few that I think went really well with the commander and what the commander and sub-commander's abilities went with. Blasphemous Act was kind of like I've seen it in every deck, and same with Path of Exile, but I actually did think this deck suited very well.
For enchantments, with this deck we went with 4. Didn't want to go too heavy with the enchantments because we obviously want to be heavy creatures, but there was some much needed enchantments that we needed to help out those creatures. And the first one being Flowering of the White Tree, which is a 2 mana legendary enchantment, which gives legendary creatures you control +2/+1, and have ward 1, and non-legendary creatures you control get +1/+1. So nice little buff. I do like the +2/+1, but the ward 1 definitely helps, and especially like the early game, to keep your creatures onto the battlefield, because who's going to pay the 1? Not a lot sometimes, depending on obviously the creatures that you have, but still a really good card to have in that deck to help with Djeru and Hozoret and creatures. We also went with Passionate Archaeologist, which is a 2 mana, another legendary enchantment, which has commander creatures you own have, whenever you cast a spell from exile, this creature deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to target opponent. So we have a lot of legendary spells that we can cast from exile that could essentially, like with the Eldrazi's being like 10 to 12 mana, just shooting target opponent for 10 damage. And like, sure, you may start out with 40 life points. If you lose 10, like, you're already at 30 life points left. We went with Rising of the Day, 3 mana. Creatures you control have haste, so another thing to give our creatures haste if we can't find the ones that make creatures give haste. But also legendary creatures you control get +1/+0, so again a nice little another buff But it's definitely the haste that is much needed to get our creature swinging in as fast as possible, and especially Djeru and Hozoret. Again, the quicker we can get them swinging and bringing legendaries out to the battlefield, the better. And last one, after kind of figuring out what to go with, I decided to go with Smothering Tithe, which is a 4 mana enchantment that whenever opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If that player doesn't, you create a colorless treasure artifact token with tap it, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color. Because there's going to be a chance that you might draw a legendary creature that you want to play, but you don't have the mana. Well, if you can get Smothering Tithe out, that will help with that solution. With artifacts, we went more mana rock favored instead of utility artifacts, just because when you're dealing with high mana legendary cards, you want to make sure that your mana is pretty fixed. And yeah, like you got your typical Soul Ring, Arcane Signet. We didn't go too crazy because we didn't want this deck to be too expensive, like the whole Jewel Lotus, Mana Crypt, so on and so forth. So just your typical Soul Ring, Arcane Signet. We went Boros Signet, Commander Sphere, Relic of Legends, which is a 3 mana artifact that you can tap to add 1 mana of any color, and tap and untap legendary creature you control, add 1 mana of any color. So if you're really stuck for mana, you can tap a legendary and gain 1 mana of any color. We have the Iron Crag in there as well, just to get that extra mana in. Thought Vessel as well, and no maximum hand size, which is a huge bonus. Now for the utility artifacts, we went with Swift Boots, which equipped creature has hexproof and haste. The equipped cost is 1. We also have the Strinic Resonator, which is a 2 mana artifact. Pay 2 and tap it, and copy target triggered ability you control. You may choose new targets for that copy. So again, that helps out with all the creatures that we have, getting those abilities to activate another time. We have Lightning Greaves, another pair of boots, 2 mana costing. Equipped creature has haste and shroud, and if anyone just needs a refresher on Shroud, it can't be the target of spells or abilities, and the equipment cost is 0, so you can just throw that right onto Djeru and Hozoret and just have a good day. We also went with Scroll Rack, which is a 2 mana artifact. You can pay 1 and tap it and exile any number of cards from your hand face down. Put that many cards from the top of your library into your hand. Then look at the exiled cards and put them on top of your library in any order. So if you manage to draw Kozilek for a reference, then don't worry, because if you pay Scroll Rack, you can put it right on top, attack with Djeru and Hozoret, and boom, there you go. You have Kozilek on the field and ready to party. We also have Hero's Podium, which is a 5 mana legendary artifact, which each legendary creature you control gets +1/+1 for each other legendary creature you control, which your creatures are going to get out of hand real quick. And the second ability is pay X and tap Hero's Podium and look at the top X cards of your library. You may reveal a legendary creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So again, this might help fixate, like if you're looking for legendary creatures, but you're either drawing lands or instances or like just a card that you don't want, then you can use that. Like look at the top like 5 cards, let's say, and then be like, oh, okay, yeah, that would have been a whiff. Now I'm going to attack with Djeru and Hozoret, and then the top 6 cards you look, and if you have options, perfect, it was worth it. We also went with Helm of the Host, which is a 4 mana legendary artifact equipment. where at the beginning of combat on your turn, create a token that's a copy of equipped creature, except the token isn't legendary. If equipped creature is legendary, that token gains haste, and the equipment is 5. So, thinking of how we want this to not only end, but like end in a reasonable manner, because as much as everyone likes to play Magic, playing 3-4 hour games is tiring, especially if you want to get multiple games in. So with Helm of the Host, it does help out because you can equip it to Aurelia or Karlach, where it will basically make a copy of that card, and there will be the original combat phase and then the combat phase of the token as well. So the more combat phases, the more triggers of Djeru and Hozoret, and the more damage spread around, because everyone loves spreading damage around on the battlefield, and that's why we went with Helm of the Host.
And now finally I get to talk about the lands of this deck. When it comes to the lands of the deck, there are
Shinka, the Blood-Soaked Keep legendary land, Furicum Snarl land, Slayer's Stronghold land, Battlefield Forge land, Clifftop Retreat land, Rugged Prairie land, Sunhome, Fortress of the Legion land.
Now I know there's not many lands that actually have a good ability that helps with the commander and sub-commander. However, I do think we're at that point that filter lands go perfect in a average commander deck now. So I think that was good to pick that. I did pick any kind of Boros lands that I thought helped in some form of a way. That would actually go really good in this deck as well. So now when it comes to the deck as a whole, I actually think this went very well. On Moxfield I have played it a few times, playtested it, seen what it was going with, and I thought it did very well. Now that's excluding other players, because I say it's different when you play this type of deck with other players. However, I think as a team thing, we did quite good on this deck, and I could potentially have seen it as an actual Magic the Gathering deck. I say there would have probably been a few changes.
So, with that being said, this deck is going to run very smooth, especially with the extra combats, multiple triggered abilities, and hopefully you can get tokens out of those creatures to add more triggers. But yeah, like I actually might change my deck to match this one, because there's more of an end game, more of a point that you're trying to get to, compared to mine where it's just dumping a bunch of creatures out and smacking people in the face. Yeah, this deck definitely has more focused, and yeah, like you can have it however way you want. If you don't have Eldrazi's, that's fine. Or if you want to throw in Jewel Lotus, Mana Crypt, the whole 9 yards, then like have at it, fill your boots. The price range can vary to like whatever fits your budget. This deck that we have on Moxfield, it is sitting currently at $596. I'm just going to round up, but again, it can vary. You can have it cheaper if you want, or you can like go full intense. You can have thousands of dollars into it.
If you want to see this deck, there is a Moxfield, it'll be linked down below. Same with pretty much anything James had to offer when it comes to. So if you're really nice, please give them a follow, give them a like, and give all the support you could possibly do, and hopefully the same happens with me.
Thank you everyone for watching this video. You can follow me on my Instagram at MTGDaddy. And before I leave, I got a couple of questions for you. One of them is, do you think Djeru and Hozoret is undervalued, and would you change anything else on this deck? Would you have chosen a different creature, or maybe land, artifacts, so on and so forth? Or would you choose a new commander and have Djeru and Hozoret in your creature spots? But leave a comment down below, and hope to talk to you again soon.
If you are a content creator yourself and want to do a deck tech video or something like that, please let me know. If you've liked stuff like this, I have other Magic the Gathering videos here, a playlist of Magic the Gathering videos and deck tech videos here, and a subscribe button here. and I want to say thank you to James for doing this collab with me, and hopefully we get to do more in the future, and I will see you all in the next video.